You can believe God for the impossible and still find yourself stuck in cycles that feel painfully familiar. You can pray with passion, speak scripture with conviction, sow in faith, confess every promise you know, and yet there are parts of your life that seem resistant to movement. For years, you may have carried the tension of believing big in your spirit while battling doubt, fear, or hesitation in your mind and body. And if you've ever wondered why your faith feels strong but your results feel slow, today's message is the answer you've been searching for. Most believers are taught how to pray for the impossible, but very few are taught how to prepare for the impossible, and there is a difference. Belief opens the door, but identity determines whether you can actually walk through it. You do not receive according to your desire. You receive according to your alignment. And alignment is not just spiritual. Alignment includes your mind and your body. Alignment is your entire internal system coming into agreement with what God has spoken. Your spirit can believe for the supernatural while your mind and body remain wired for the natural. Your spirit can pray for overflow while your internal system still braces for loss. Your spirit can trust God for increase while your mind and body still remember seasons where you barely survived. And those mixed signals create an invisible resistance inside you, resistance you can't rebuke away, resistance you can't shout away, resistance you can't decree away. Resistance that requires a deeper kind of transformation, identity transformation. This is where the enemy does his most subtle work. Not in your theology, not in your prayer life, but in the quiet places where your mind and body store old experiences, old disappointments, old fears, old survival strategies, old emotions, and old self-protection patterns. Your spirit may be ready for the impossible, but your internal system may still be structured for the familiar. And nothing keeps someone stuck like the familiar, especially when the familiar once saved you. When the familiar once protected you, your mind and body cling to it tightly because your system is always loyal to what it believes is safe, even if that safe place is the very thing now blocking your next level. God can pull you forward, but your internal wiring will always pull you back to the last version of you that felt predictable, the version of you that knew how to survive. The version of you that learned how to hide, shrink, brace, adjust, perform, or overfunction. The version of you that learned how to manage disappointment instead of expect blessing. The version of you that learned to anticipate rejection instead of assume favor. This is why believing for the impossible feels exhausting for many believers. It's not the faith that's tiring you out, it's the misalignment. You're trying to believe from your spirit while your mind and body are still rehearsing the past. You're trying to step into supernatural identity while your internal system is organized around old evidence. You're asking God for increase while your system is calibrated for scarcity. And you are trying to embody a new season without updating the parts of you that actually live inside the season. Identity is not just spiritual. Identity is what your mind and body believe is true about you. Identity is the internal blueprint that determines how much you can hold. Identity is the lens that determines what feels possible, what feels safe, and what feels available. Identity is the invisible foundation underneath every decision you make. And this is why, for some people, believing God for the impossible feels like a tug of war. Your spirit is pulling you forward while your internal wiring pulls you back. But once you learn how to shift your identity, how to align your spirit, your thoughts, your emotions, your expectations, and your nervous system, faith becomes easier, obedience becomes lighter, decisions become clearer, peace becomes steadier. And the impossible becomes possible, not because God finally moved, but because you finally aligned with what He already intended. This is where the protocol comes in, a spiritual and neurological protocol for identity transformation. A protocol that helps bring your entire system, spirit, mind, and body into alignment with the supernatural life God has for you. A protocol that reflects how God designed human transformation to work from the inside out. A protocol that allows you to stabilize your identity so you can sustain the blessings, opportunities, and breakthroughs you've been praying for. The protocol begins with regulation. Regulation isn't about calming down, it's about creating internal agreement. You regulate to bring your mind and body out of survival mode. You regulate to quiet the false alarms that past experiences taught you to anticipate. You regulate to create the internal safety required for your system to receive new identity instead of resisting it. Because you cannot expect your mind and body to embrace a new season while they are still bracing for what hurt you in the last one. You cannot expand when your internal alarms are going off, telling you subconsciously that growth is dangerous. When your system believes change is unsafe, it blocks what your spirit is praying for. True belief requires internal safety because faith cannot stabilize in a dysregulated system. Once regulation softens the internal ground, the next part of the protocol is recall. Recall is where you remind your system of what peace, ease, provision, joy, or divine alignment feels like. You're not living in the past. You are using the past as evidence that God has been faithful, evidence your system can trust, evidence that tells your mind and body, we have been here before. Safety is possible. Provision is possible. Joy is possible. God's presence is familiar. Recall reintroduces your internal system to the emotional and physiological state of safety. And when the system feels safe, it becomes willing to consider new identity, new possibilities, and new levels. Without recall, your system has nothing to anchor transformation to. With recall, your mind and body build a bridge between what was and what can be. This is when imagery becomes powerful. Imagery is not manifestation. Imagery is not wishful thinking. Imagery is the internal rehearsal of identity. It's the moment when your mind and body get a small, embodied preview of the future God is calling you into. The imagery is not about seeing something, it's about feeling it. Transformation does not happen through imagination alone, it happens through sensation. When you imagine yourself stepping into increase, the key question is, what does it feel like? How does your breathing shift? How does your posture settle? How does your emotional tone change? How does your internal atmosphere adjust? Because sensation is the language of the nervous system. Feeling is what makes identity believable. When your system feels a future version of you, even briefly, it begins to accept that identity as familiar rather than foreign. And once your mind and body feel who you are becoming, identity begins to shift. But identity does not stabilize without action. This is the final part of the protocol, embodied action, not massive leaps, not overwhelming steps, just one aligned behavior that confirms the identity you are stepping into. Because identity is not formed by what you think, identity is formed by what you practice. Practice is what tells your mind and body, this is who we are now. every action becomes evidence. And evidence becomes identity. Let me pause here for a moment. If this message is resonating with you, if you can feel parts of yourself awakening, softening, or stretching, I want you to take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video. These teachings help so many people step into the life God has been calling them to, and your engagement helps this message reach the people who need it most. Let's go deeper. This protocol is the reason some people transform in ways that seem impossible to others. It's not because they are more anointed. It's not because they are more gifted. It's because they brought their entire internal system into alignment with what God was doing. They didn't just pray for breakthrough, they prepared for it. They didn't just believe for change, they became the person who could sustain it. They didn't just hope for favor, they stepped into the identity that could hold it without collapsing. And this is why this teaching belongs in your Believe for the Impossible series. Because believing God for the impossible is not just about stretching your faith, it's about stretching your identity. It's about enlarging your internal capacity to receive the very things you've been praying for. It's about becoming the kind of person who can hold increase without fear, responsibility without overwhelm, visibility without shrinking, influence without imposter syndrome, and blessing without self-sabotage. This message teaches the preparation required for the impossible, the invisible work, the inner work, the alignment work, the work that no one sees but everyone feels the effects of. The work that allows your prayers to take root in the soil of your identity, not just the soil of your intention. When your spirit believes, your mind agrees, and your body feels safe, the impossible becomes normal, not because the journey gets easier, but because you become stronger. Not because trials disappear, but because identity stabilizes. Not because circumstances shift instantly, but because your internal world is no longer fighting your external destiny. This is the place where fear loses its grip. This is the place where self-doubt quiets. This is the place where procrastination softens. This is the place where faith stops being something you feel and becomes something you embody. This is the place where you step into the next level with confidence, clarity, and authority. As we close, I want you to carry this truth with you. The impossible is not waiting on God. It is waiting on the aligned, activated, identity-secure version of you. The one who believes at the level of their calling. The one whose internal system can hold what God is releasing. The one who is no longer rehearsing the past, but preparing for the future. The one who is ready not just spiritually, but mentally, emotionally, and physiologically to walk in divine promise. So watch the full Believe for the Impossible series, download your free devotional, share this teaching with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more identity shifting, faith building, spiritually aligned, neuroscience backed teachings like this. You are stepping into alignment, and alignment is the doorway to the impossible.